Welcome to the new Grad Success Summit. I am so excited. In this session, we are going to be talking about education. What is it like to be a physical therapist educator? And hopefully this will expand to other healthcare professionals too. I am here with the amazingly talented F. Scott Feil. He has done so many things for this profession in physical therapy. He is running the Healthcare Education Transformation podcast, also PT educator, and he is just overall an advocate for the profession. Thank you, F. Scott, for being here and for sharing your information on what it's like to be an educator in this profession.
Yeah, Emma, thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing. I think there's a lot of good information out there to be had. And, things like this are the only way that we're going to get it out there and disseminate it. So, like I said, I can't thank you enough for having me on. And I'm just excited to share my knowledge.
Definitely. Well, you have a unique story. F. Scott is not just a physical therapist, but he also has an education degree. And so do you want to just briefly share your story of how you went about choosing that and where it's gotten you so far?
Yeah. So, I tell people this all the time. My story and my path to get to where I am now is the least normal path that you can imagine. I started out as an English major at Wake Forest University. And, I placed out of a bunch of freshman English courses because my dad was an English teacher, hence F. Scott Feil. He was an English teacher on Long Island for 32 years. And, it got to the point where I was just good at reading and writing. He started us at a very early age. I placed out of some courses. So senior year, I was taking golf, bowling, and intro to Japan as my final three courses. So I had all the time in the world. But I didn't want to write. I didn't want to edit. I didn't want to teach. So I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. So I started volunteering at the hospital, thinking maybe I'll go to med school or something. And they put me in the PT department, which was, pretty fortunate because I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is really cool. I could do this. Then I looked at the list of prerequisites and I was like, nope, don't have that one. Nope, don't have that one. Nope, don't have that one. So I graduated in 4 years with a BA in English, but then it took another year of prereqs just to get into PT school. I went to East Carolina for my master's in physical therapy and then was offered a third-year transitional doctorate. They did that for 2 years before they moved on to a full-on DPT. And so I started it at East Carolina, but life kind of got in the way. My dad got sick, ended up passing away, and I ended up not finishing it at East Carolina. So I took a year. I traveled. I just wanted to kind of find myself and, took a traveling job as a PT and came back and started the transitional doctorate at University of St. Augustine. A couple of my credits transferred over, so that was pretty nice. I was able to finish up the transitional doctorate. And while I was there, the head of the educational doctorate actually came to me and said, hey, are you interested in teaching eventually? And I said, no, not really. Why? And he said, well, 2 of the courses or 3 of the courses that you're taking in the transitional doctorate overlap in the educational doctorate. So you could knock a 4-year program down to a 3-year program if you wanted a terminal degree. So I went home and I kind of thought about it, talked it over with my wife, and we decided, it could be maybe a good retirement plan, something to fall back on. If my back goes out or my hands give out and I can't do manual therapy, and I just can't do the therapy anymore, maybe I could teach. So it started that way. And then I got about 2-3 years into the program, and the didactic stuff started wrapping up and the dissertation started, and I just didn't enjoy it. I was like, had a couple of residencies and teaching opportunities along the way. Didn't like the politics, didn't like the red tape, didn't like a lot of what was going on. And now I thought, well, shoot, I'm 3 years into this educational doctorate with a year to go. I better figure it out, So I ended up completing the dissertation. I finished my EDD. I graduated in December. And since then, I've taught just a couple of courses, adjunct for Baylor University's new 2-year DPT program. The teaching jobs are not out of the question fully yet, but they are still a big question mark. So that's been my journey. Like I said, it's been a wild and crazy one, but it's gotten me to where I am today, and it's opened up a lot of opportunities I never thought it would.
Well, I think everyone always wants to know, what is the life like of someone in education? Can you give us sort of a brief perspective of sort of the 9 to 5? Because I'm sure it's not all rainbows and sunshine.
Yeah, no, for me, I have to admit, being an adjunct is a whole lot easier than being core faculty 24/7. I got to shadow a couple of people that were core faculty in my residencies. And that's where, there's a lot that goes on that people don't realize. You have your courses that you're going to teach, a couple days a week, anywhere from 3 to 5 courses, maybe, just depending, every semester. And then on top of that, you have all these obligations to the university, right? You have obligations to the department, obligations to the university as far as community service and outreach. You have your department meetings and stuff. And that's where, a lot of this kind of gets overlooked, and it's not like you're getting paid anymore to go to these things and fulfill these obligations. They're just things that you have to kind of do, if you want to be looked in kind of a good light in academia. And, eventually if you want to get tenured, maybe if you want a tenure position, the good thing, I think at least, is that tenure is kind of dying. It's not really that important anymore. But again, it's going to come down to basically how well you perform, right? As a teacher, your student evaluations, how well you click, and you want to, again, have that good view of you in the department. So you're going to try to go above and beyond. You're going to try to do research. You're going to try to publish. You're going to try to, do your volunteer hours and your community service stuff, and, everything that you can to try to keep a job, essentially. And like I said, as an adjunct, I don't have those pressures. It's pretty nice to work a 9 to 5 clinically, because I don't ever want to leave the clinical world. I think I'll always do that to some extent. But the teaching aspect for adjuncts is a lot easier. We just come in, for one course per semester here or there, and then we help out with labs and things as needed. So it's a lot less pressure. Obviously it's not enough to pay the bills, but if you enjoy teaching, it's a good way to dabble a little bit.
Yeah, it's sort of like per diem almost, where it's just as needed. If they need an extra course, you can pick that up. And so you're almost suggesting, is adjunct, you think, a good way to test the waters if you want to start the education route, and then sort of see if you wanted then to progress into more of a faculty position?
I would definitely say so. I say, you could probably even back it up a little bit more before that. If you think teaching is something that you want to do and you're interested in, if you think you want to pursue a terminal degree, I would say pump the brakes and talk to a local university PT program, PTA program, and see if you can start with just a guest lecture here or there about a topic that you love, that you're passionate about. Get in touch with the director of the program, get in touch with the professor that may be teaching the course that topic might fall into, and start with a guest lecture. If that goes okay, then you can start reaching out, see if you can be a lab assistant, or, like I said, somebody who might just help out with courses here or there, or even have some students come out live for courses and hands-on activities. From there, then if that's really starting to go well, that's when I think you dive into the adjunct position, because then you're really taking on a full course. You're, kind of designing your own curriculum, putting together your syllabus, stuff like that. And then from there, if you find that you really enjoy it, then you can dive in full on core faculty. I mean, some people just know right out of the gates that's what they want to do. But like I said, a terminal degree is really something that's an investment in time, in money, effort, stress, time away from the family. I mean, it's tough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's brutal. And I would never recommend it on my worst enemy, but we do it over and over and over to ourselves, and people keep doing it. So as long as people keep coming out on the other end, I think it'll still be around,
No, I think you have a perfect point. I really like that structure to testing the water. So it's basically guest lecture, or maybe do some TA work, or just helping on the side. And then from there, you can sort of get a feel for, do you have a classroom presence? Do you like interacting? Do you like taking these questions? How is that actual experience? And then working up towards those different levels of adjunct, and then maybe permanent faculty. Awesome. Now, I have a question. You brought up sort of creating your syllabus. So I've always wondered this: if you are even an adjunct professor, do you have to basically from scratch create a syllabus and all those things? Because I don't even know where I would start if I wanted to do that.
Yeah. It depends. It really depends on the situation. It's very, very university specific and even department specific, and then even course specific. I've had people who have been asked to teach on a very short notice because of either a family leave or an absence or something that happened, and they already had the syllabus and everything in check. They just had to basically step in and present it. EIM, their hybrid models, their 2-year programs, the way that they're kind of doing it is South College and Baylor and all the universities that come after that are working more of a collaboration where, they're all kind of using the same structure, and the professors of each course in each university are talking about what's working, what's not, how to make it better. So there's a lot of sharing and collaborating going on with them and their programs. And that's not very common. That's new. A lot of, we found this a lot in the Healthcare Education Transformation podcast, that academia for so long has been so protective over their stuff. They think their program's the best and they don't want to share their secrets, and, which is ridiculous. But, it is what it is. We're trying to break down those barriers and say, like, hey guys, if this is the best possible way to do this, like, we should all be sharing this. Like, we want the best possible product of student that we can produce in our profession, then we should be sharing all that information. So, that was part of the reason we started the podcast, was we felt, the healthcare education system was broken. A lot of silos up, and we were trying to just break those down and learn. Brandon and I didn't have the answers. I mean, we were still green behind the ears. We still are. I mean, but we knew that if we asked the experts to come on and talk about it, eventually we'd get enough information that the picture would start coming more clear. And that's kind of what's happened.
Definitely. Now, I know that you've done a little bit of curriculum development, correct?
Absolutely.
So can you go into that? Because I'm sure that's a really interesting feature of education.
Yeah, it's actually become a kind of a specialty of mine, but in a non-traditional sense. When I realized I didn't really necessarily know if I wanted to teach in academia, and I had this $140,000 worth of debt staring me down, I started to get nervous and anxious, and just like, what am I going to do? But luckily, after talking to some business mentors and some coaches and some, well-respected people in the industry, I started realizing it's going to be okay. You just have to leverage your educational doctorate and your knowledge and what you're good at to help people. And as long as you can help solve a problem, people are willing to work with you. They're willing to pay you for your services. So I've created a couple of courses myself. That's how it kind of started. Very non-traditional. They're more for the public. One of them is a fantasy football injury review course for those people who play fantasy football. And the second one should be coming out any month now, and it's basically video game injury prevention. I was working in workman's comp for a long time, seeing a lot of repetitive injuries, a lot of repetitive motion stuff, postural issues. And I thought, this is the same exact stuff that esports athletes and video gamers are going through, I could apply a lot of this stuff I'm doing with workman's comp to esports and video games, because that was something I enjoyed. I wasn't much of a player. I always used to watch my brother play them. I just never had time with grad school and all. And so I enjoyed watching video games. I just didn't like playing them much. But I do know that, he used to have a carpal tunnel issue from playing so much. So I thought, I could definitely, PTs are in the prime position to help people, with hand and wrist issues, elbow issues, shoulder issues, postural issues, and then even to the extent of dietary stuff. So, I just created the courses the way that I knew, through my pedagogy and my teaching, I knew how to do. I just basically laid them out. I laid out the skeleton, and then I kind of filled them in with my expertise. And then I figured out, all right, well, if I can do this for me, I know there's other people out there that are dying to create a course. I can help them with that. So I definitely, reached out to a couple people that were talking through some ideas. And since then, we've got about 3 or 4 courses releasing over the next probably 6 months. They're, not my courses, just courses that I've helped with. One of them happens to be Stephen Dunn's Pilates course, and I knew nothing about Pilates. I mean, nothing. But I was able to structure the course in the way it needed to be delivered, and then Stephen just filled in the blanks. And it was basically a great way to introduce PTs to Pilates.
I love it.
Yeah. And again, it's stuff that I wanted to know about. So I wanted to learn. So I went down there with the intention of learning. and it's worked out great. We've had a blast with the next couple of courses that I've been working with people on.
That's great. So I mean, luckily it all ends up, I know you had a rough go with your education degree, but it seems like, you really did learn a lot from that degree, which has helped you then leverage other skills. So even if you're not always directly teaching, there are still unique skills that you've garnered from that degree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, again, curriculum development, how to teach, essentially how we best teach, how we learn, the theory behind learning. And especially one of the more important things I got from the EDD was adult learning and how it's way different than developmental learning, and you just got to realize that we as adults, we want to learn for the most part, but we just learn differently. So you've got to kind of take and apply some of that. And like I said, it really put me at ease knowing that I could use the skills that I learned in an educational doctorate degree to kind of help others learn, other topics. So it's been a weird transition, but at the same time, I feel like I'm still educating and I'm still teaching. So I'm using the knowledge. It's just not in the four walls of academia, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Now, is there a way to ever include these into traditional programs? Because as I'm listening to you, I'm like, well, a lot of people don't know, but I mean, people that do fantasy games and video games, there are huge tournaments where these guys are literally millionaires. So you're looking at all these different routes and even telehealth and all these other routes. Do you see that eventually these unique expertise are starting to grow into the different curriculums in healthcare?
I would say yes and no. I don't think, and this is just stuff that we've learned from the podcast, but I don't think there's enough time in traditional and even these shortened 2-year programs to cover a lot of this stuff. I think what can happen, though, is you can pique people's interest and get them critically thinking about these things by incorporating it into your everyday courses. So let's say I want to have a case study about carpal tunnel. The study that I can use is a video gamer that I had that was having carpal tunnel from repetitive motion type stuff. So, and then once we talk about the case study, I can say, hey, look, this was a real life actual person who I treated via telehealth, ironically. And then, now it starts getting them thinking, okay, wow, I really love video games. I want to help esports folks. I mean, right up the street, I'm in Waco here. In Arlington, they just opened the largest esports arena in the nation, 1,500 seats to watch 5 or 6 people sit there and play a video game. It's nuts, but it's a real thing. I mean, I don't even want to get into China and Japan and how big it is over there. But it's coming here. ESPN just signed a big contract to televise some of it. So it's coming. And again, I think physical therapists are primed to be in a spot to help these people when they do have injuries that arise. And, there's even universities that are offering scholarships at this point. So it's a thing. You just got to, roll with it. And the big thing here, the reason that I'm such an advocate for the field of physical therapy is that I feel that physical therapy should just be the tip of our iceberg. And I don't mean that in like a negative way. I literally mean that we have such a vast, spectrum of knowledge that we can use in so many different avenues, in so many different ways. And we're already creative and we're really adaptive, right? We adapt exercises, we adapt equipment, we adapt plans of care. We're so good at figuring out and problem solving. We just need to now take that and connect A, physical therapy, with B, whatever niche or specialty that we love. And we can really start turning that into some interesting business opportunities and, some interesting specialty niches in the future.
Definitely. Sorry, everyone. That was my own question. I was just curious. Sorry to go off of the tangent of how to become an educator. Back to the original purpose of why I have Scott on here. Thank you, everyone, for putting up with me. So back to adjunct teaching, because I think that is where I've seen a majority of the positions out there. If you're, say, doing one class as an adjunct professor, what's sort of the time that you need to commit to that? Because I know probably people are going to be working full-time as well. So how does that go about?
Yeah, for me, it was pretty simple. While I was teaching, I would say it was probably about 5 to 8 hours a week for Baylor. Not terribly demanding. They've done a great job of setting up there's like a lead professor in charge of the course, and then there's about 4 to 6 adjuncts that work with them to help grade assignments, to help with labs, to help, with tests and writing assignments and stuff like that. So they've done a really good job of spreading it out. The main thing becomes, as these 2-year programs take on larger cohorts of 50, 80, 100 students, you've still got to keep a ratio of students to professors that makes sense. So, a 1 to 10, 1 to 12, maybe even 1 to 15 or so. I don't know what the actual numbers are, if CAPTE has a certain requirement or recommended requirement, but at the end of the day, you want a good ratio, or else, one professor is not going to be able to take care of 100 students every semester. It's just not going to happen. So why not go out there and find the best of the best, and the experts in that area, and have them come in and help the main professor work through a course for the semester. So yeah, it's going to be different with your workload, how many courses you're teaching, how aggressive the course is, how much of the course you're teaching versus, other people, assistants or helpers. But for me, like I said, right now, it was probably about 5 to 8 hours a week when I was teaching one course per semester.
Okay, that's not too bad. Now let's dive into the pros and cons of education versus clinical, because you're actually a perfect person to ask this to, because you've done both a lot of clinical work and education. So what are some of the pros and cons?
Yeah, like I said, I can't see myself ever giving up clinical. Even if I teach full time, it'll still be part-time clinical. I got to have my hands on people. I got to be out there and, working with patients. And I feel that that's one of the biggest disconnects that we found between academia and clinical, is that ivory tower of academia, not being in touch with what's actually going on in the clinic. And I don't ever want to be that professor that's not working towards, clinical stuff. So that's just my own personal belief in what I'd like to do. But some of the pros of working, in academia is you get a little bit of, call it leeway or freedom. You actually get time to think. You get time put aside to sit there and think about, all right, what's going on? What are some questions I want answered? How can I attack those questions and get them answered? Whether it be research or more clinical work, or teaching the topic. So you do get some free time. I think overall it's a relatively safe job, in that, if you are working towards tenure, eventually you're, pretty much locked in for a position. Like I said, I kind of feel like tenure is dying, though. It's not something to really look forward to. I don't know that it'll be around too much longer. Especially the education bubble, to me, is the next one that's going to burst. So things are really going to get shaken up when that happens. But it's a relatively safe job. The hours are pretty decent. And I think just the fact that you're molding young minds and helping them move along their progression into the profession, to me is one of the biggest pros. Some of the cons, you could lose a lot of time in the clinic because you're teaching, so much. If you teach full time, it's going to be tough to find hours for clinical stuff sometimes. My biggest pro or con that I've run into, and this again started way back in the residency days, so it wasn't recent. It was a lot of politics and red tape. I don't want to say that programs teach toward the NPTE exam, but they have to some extent, because their students have to pass, because they need good pass rates in order to keep their accreditation. And so, they're kind of limited. They're handcuffed with what they can actually teach. So you lose a little bit of autonomy, I think, and how you want to teach and what you want to teach. You're still going to have your own style. You're still going to do the best you can to educate them and get them ready for the test. But, at the end of the day, it would be nice to teach what you want when you want. And like we talked about earlier, I just don't see a lot of time to fit in some of these things. So you got to get creative with that. I just noticed a lot of tension, interdepartmental tensions. Some people didn't like the way you taught one thing or that thing, or, and there was, I wouldn't say fighting, maybe some light bickering, but it was just, there were tensions that I just was like, really? We should be working together, guys. Like this, let's talk it out. Let's think of some positive ways that we can maybe address these things and figure it out. But, I guess it's just like any office, right? There's a lot of personalities that have to be managed. So, um, that was kind of one of the cons. And, I think that the one thing that put my mind at ease with all these cons that I've run into over the last couple of years is everybody that I talked to in academia, whether they liked it or not, said, as long as you find your right fit, you'll be fine. So that's where I'm at now. I think is just kind of looking for the right fit to see if teaching full time is going to be something that I want to pursue down the line.
Gotcha. Now, everyone always wants to grow, wants to, move up the career ladder, so to speak. Is there much of a growth phase in education?
Yeah, we've had a couple of guests on that kind of walk us through this process, but we kind of talked about it. You can start maybe as an adjunct professor, and then you kind of move up to a I guess it's associate professor, then full professor, and then tenure track. Like I said, I'm not too concerned about it right now, just because I feel like tenure's dying, and I feel like things are going to change anyway. But there is a natural progression you can go to as a professor, and then eventually, if you want to, I guess, become a director of a program as well. And then beyond that, as we've seen recently with the APTA president Sharon Dunn, you can become the dean of a medical program of I think what is it, LSU's medical program. So there are ways to kind of climb your way up within a university system. Again, it just takes a long time. It's an investment. You got to be willing to ride it out for the long haul if that's what you're looking to do. And I think people who kind of do that know pretty early on that they're going the education route. That's just what they want and how they're going to pursue things.
Got it. Now, if you're really interested in this route, how do you go about sort of finding, I know it sort of happened to you accidentally about the education program, but how does one go about finding these different programs?
I think the best thing to do is to recognize which terminal degree is best for you, whether it be an educational doctorate like I have, and that's a little more based in theory and teaching and educating and curriculum, or a PhD, which would be a little more probably physical therapy, rehabilitation, biomechanics based and real heavy on the research, or a doctorate of science, a DSc, which again is going to be a little more heavily research based, but again, more into the science realm of things. The best way to do that to me is just to network, just talk to people who have those degrees, ask them the pros and cons, what their program was like. If anybody were to come to me asking for terminal degree advice, I would say whatever's cheapest and whatever's quickest. It's just a reality of the way things are heading these days. I don't think it matters where you graduate from. I've never had somebody on an application, ask where I got my terminal degree from and why, or even my DPT from and why. It was just basically, do you have a license? All right, great, you're hired. They just want the qualifications. They want the piece of paper. And people can argue that which school you went to is going to possibly get you in over somebody else. And, it might, but it doesn't, to me, it doesn't warrant paying that much money to go to a bigger, better school to get a possible job down the future. Like I said, I just feel like I'm a big believer in networking. And if you network the right way with the right people, some of those gaps can be kind of overcome, I think.
That makes sense. Are there any specific questions that someone should ask themselves? Like, say, focusing on the educational terminal degree, is there any specific questions that you think would be helpful for someone to ask themselves if they want to pursue that route?
Yeah, I think, some of the big ones are, can I afford this, right? What's it going to look like? Can I work full time while trying to do it? I did, and it was absolutely awful. Again, I wouldn't recommend it, but it's life. It's what I had to do, What kind of effect is this going to have on me, my health, and my family? Hopefully if you're young and single and got nothing to worry about but yourself, then, by all means have at it. But it definitely takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of hard work. You're going to have areas of your life that are going to suffer at times. They're going to it's going to take time away from other stuff. So you definitely have to ask yourself, am I right for this? Am I primed and ready for this? Am I committed to put in the work? Because surprisingly, a lot of people, they get into a terminal degree program and then they don't finish. They go ABD, which is all but dissertation. And I don't know, I just couldn't imagine getting to that point and then not finishing, but it happens for a lot of reasons. And I don't fault anybody for bailing out. I've seen what it's like. So been there, done that.
And so now that someone's asked themselves the questions and they feel like they're committed and they want to start doing the research, is there a specific site that has a list of these different terminal degree programs, like similar to PTCAS?
Not exactly. We were just talking about this recently on an episode that, we really don't have a great bridge from the DPT to a terminal degree. There's a couple of schools that we've interviewed people from that do have some sort of programs. I know Texas Women's University has a DPT/PhD program that kind of incorporates some courses toward a terminal degree. Trying to think of some of the other ones.
So it's almost like researching the schools themselves and then seeing within their website if they do have terminal degree program.
Yeah, to some extent. And I mean, realistically, Delaware, UD is another one. They've got a PhD program in biomechanics. You kind of have to know what your specialty is and what you want to do in order to find a PhD program in that specialty. So again, if you were to Google, top 5 biomechanics PhDs in the nation, that would give you your 5 schools to maybe poke around and shoot for. For me, the educational doctorate made the most sense because if I truly didn't want to teach physical therapy, I could always teach education. And that, to me, gave me another outlet and another possibility for opportunity. So, the EDD for me was just, like I said, it made sense. It kind of fell into my lap. It was somewhat accidental, but, it definitely made more sense to me than a PhD in something physical therapy related that would have pigeonholed me into only teaching physical therapy.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's sort of like, what career route do you want? And then try to pursue the degrees that are parallel with that, but then also trying to sort of leverage your bets and trying to see, what is a degree that can sort of be able to funnel into many different career routes for you. Absolutely. That's a really smart call. Now, say you've done your research and you have chosen programs. Going through that, what would be some big questions to ask yourself about choosing which program over another program?
I mean, it's different for everybody, right? They're all going to have their own personal reasons for doing it. A lot of times, especially PhD and DSC related, it's because of your mentor and who you want to study under and who you want to do research under. That'll pretty much make the decision for you. Again, for me, if I was choosing, I would choose the cheapest and the quickest. Which of these programs is going to get me done at ASAP and which one of these is the most affordable. That would be my personal decision looking back on it. I didn't do it that way. I really kind of screwed things up. I went to a private school, then a state school, then a private school. So I'm going to preach to my kids community college for 2 years, then state school for 2 years, then state school for grad school if you want, but we'll see if they listen. Unless I'm teaching somewhere full time, then that's where they're going because that's where they're going. You get a discount for your kids, then that's where my kids are attending, But yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's just personal for everybody and their decision has to be, what's more important to you, right? Is your mentor and your path of research the most important? Is the topic the most important? Where you're getting your PhD in, top 5 programs for that. Is the name of the school important to you? Some people just love some of the big names, USC and Duke and all those, and Ivy League schools. So it's just kind of a personal decision at that point. But again, my recommendation on it, fast and cheap. Let's get it over with.
Well, and I also think it's if you wanted to like live in a certain area, I think that's super important too.
Big time.
I always think, whenever you're picking a school, also pick, is that somewhere that you want to live? Because those are all the network and the connections that you're building.
Yeah.
So that, and probably even if that, say that was a school that you always wanted to teach at, I think getting a terminal degree at that school will help funnel you into that position with them because they already know you. Are a couple of the things that come off the
Yeah.
top of my mind.
Surprisingly, that yes and no. When it comes to terminal degrees, once you finish at a university, a lot of times they like to kick you out after that and not bring you back, because they want you to leave that echo chamber of where you just were for 4 years and the ideas that university has brought to you. They want you to go and spread that, to other areas and other universities. Not to say that you can't get a job where you graduated from and you're an alumni from. It does probably help. But it's from some of the PhDs we've had on the podcast, it's not that it's frowned upon, but they definitely recommend going out and professing to the world what you've learned and your research. So they do like you to go out and explore other options, but not to say that it's impossible to get a job at your alumni school.
Are there any other like key takeaways or points that you really want to let other new graduates and physical therapists on this summit know?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, keep in mind that you're in a phenomenal profession. Anything medically related, obviously, is going to be a pretty good job for the next rest of your life. So, you're in a great profession. You got nothing to worry about there. But our profession, specifically with physical therapy, like I said, just has so many avenues that we can go down and so many opportunities. From things like going into large companies and trying to help with injury prevention and wellness. I know Mike Eisenhart of the APHPT, he's big on, teaching companies how to prevent injuries from happening before they happen, and how to teach diet and exercise and wellness so that these things don't become an issue. Population health is going to be huge down the line. So get in touch with your local, community center and see if you can't help set up a program there, again, like look at the fantasy football course, right? Like that has, seemingly little to do with physical therapy. But when you really look at it, Stefania Bell's on ESPN analyzing injuries every week, right? So, I mean, physical therapists have a really good stake in medical fields right now, and we can really spread our tentacles out far and wide, and we should. Find your area of expertise, find your niche, find what you love doing, your passion. And if you can connect your passion with, like I said, something where there's a need and the market will pay for it, well, there you go. You're set. You've got a business lined up and ready to go.
Awesome. Thank you, F. Scott, for being here. If anyone has any questions on this topic, as well as anything else, please share some of your resources.
Yeah, pteducator.com is the best place to find me. That's where all my social media links are. That's where, podcast links are. And that's where my new stuff is coming out. Actually, I've just kind of recently taken a turn with PT Educator, where I'm trying to help professors learn how to make money aside from just academia, so that you don't have to be pigeonholed into a $65,000 or $75,000 a year salary and live off that. Because as professors and people who have gone through terminal degrees, we have so many skill sets. I mean, the list is just too long. So we shouldn't just, if you want to teach and you want to be passionate about teaching, you should be able to do that freely without having to worry about salary or tenure or the politics and red tape. So there's a lot of side gigs and side avenues that can be, started as little businesses and stuff for these professors. And I think I'm going to try to help a handful of professors make at least their salary and their side gig, if not more. So that's the plan for pteducator.com and the direction we're heading with that. So I'm pretty excited for that over the next year or two. It should be pretty big stuff.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to that. I'm super interested in that. And I think that's an amazing resource. And then you also have the podcast, the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast, which has a lot of great resources on this topic as well, like you've pointed out throughout the webinar as well.
Yeah, we kind of use it as a library now. If somebody has a question about how to write a dissertation. We just had a great episode about that. We refer them there. If somebody has a question about, how to pass the NPTE, we have a good episode about that. If somebody has a question about sports residency, oh, well, we did an episode back here about that. So we literally just refer people nowadays to episodes, which is great. That was kind of the hope, was that we could craft enough topics in a library where we could send people to where we had the experts on to talk about it, because we didn't know, but now we do, because we were able to interview the experts. We just send them over to the episode, and most of their questions can get answered.
Perfect. Well, everyone, I'll have those links below. And then look out for our live panel on August 17th, where hopefully we can convince F. Scott and Brandon from the Healthcare Education Transformation podcast to be there as well. But if not, we'll always share those questions with them to make sure they get answered. And look out for our next session on the new Grad Success Summit. And thanks so much, F. Scott, for being here. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, Emma, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.